Greatly enjoyed first two sessions. In the first half, I was gratified with radicalism, with justness and appropriateness of remarks, uh, and the depth with which poetry in Oriya has been put forward in papers and otherwise by commentary. And the third session, I think, is going to be even more remarkable because you have one of the most important representatives in this country of English poetry, Jayant Mahapatra, who in this session will be reflecting on poetry and will be reading also some of his maybe poems that he would like to, the recent ones or whatever, up to you. So I welcome him to take the mic and begin his discussion and presentation.
Thank you. It's really difficult to start something on your own self. It doesn't look good, it doesn't sound good, and it's quite embarrassing for a person like me. So please excuse me if I use too many I's in my conversation with you. I'm not an I person, and I don't like sitting here and talking to you from a pedestal. So please bear with me for whatever I'll be sharing with you with. Now let me talk a little about myself. I didn't want to be a poet, and today I don't know if I'm a poet or not. It's difficult to be a poet. I don't know how people say that he's a poet, she's a poet. I don't know, it's not a good thing to hear somebody say that he's a poet or she's a poet. Sometimes I don't feel all right about that. And actually I'm a student of science, and I began writing very late in life. I never knew that I was going to read and write poetry. I never read any poetry before. So when I started writing poetry late in my life, I knew I was writing some mush, something which people didn't think was poetry. When my first book appeared in 1971, I got some very, very bad and terrible reviews of my book. Any other person would have given up writing poetry and gone back to physics, but I didn't. Some or other I began dabbling in other things. Photography was one of my main preoccupations. I like to take pictures even today, and the sort of restlessness showed in my life and in the relationships I had with my friends and my own relations. So these relationships are also very weak. They were not strong. And you could say that I wasn't a very consistent type of person. I was very, very restless. I couldn't just sit in one place and talk to you. It was very difficult for me to do that. But somehow or other, I passed through my life. And if I go back to something which I have said again, I didn't have a very happy childhood. I felt terribly lonely at home. And the school I studied in And the class in which I was had students who were much older to me, and I was subjected to continuous bullying of thoughts. That made my life miserable. And I wanted to run away from school. I wanted to run away from home because I couldn't get well with my mother. And here I couldn't get well with my class fellows. So in the long run, and when I was young, not even in my teens, I ran away to Bombay, slept in the streets of Bombay, and that's how my life began. I don't know if it has anything to do with the poetry I wrote later, but probably the experiences I have had are varied. I've been hungry, I've slept with beggars in the Howrah station all through the night. I mean, I've had some experiences which I mean, the elite people don't have it, which, what would I say, bureaucratic poets don't have, or academic poets don't have. So, yeah, I don't belong to that category. I'm a very down-to-earth person, and that's how my the beginnings of my life were, and that's how I I I managed to get into life. Well, later on, as I began to improve in the language, that is, the language was English for me because I studied in a missionary school, and the language held me. I was enamored by the words. I was fascinated by the English language. So I learned how to turn and twist the words, find out various meanings, and I could rotate the words, make a verb into an adjective, or an adjective into a noun, and these things really fascinated me. So it was a language primarily which moved me into the writing of poetry. I don't know whether it's a right thing, but then I would say that language is the carrier of poetry. It carries poetry through. If you don't have the basics of good language, of strong language, it won't take your feeling and it won't take your feeling through the poem and bring you to that conclusion that a good and strong poem needs to be heard and felt. So I polished my language. When I began writing in English, my English was quite good, that's what I could say. And so, after writing a number of books in English, I felt that I had done enough work in English. I began to go back to my own language, that is Odia, and began writing in Odia. So I did the opposite things in life. Now when people are writing in English, after having written in Odia, I did just the opposite. I'm writing in Odia now, after writing in English. So that's how my life is. I don't belong to the temple-going category. That means I don't travel. If there is a railway line, I won't travel in between the railway lines. I like to go away from the railway lines. That means if there is a straight road, I wouldn't like to take the road. I'd like to go to a jungle path and then go into the jungle itself and to try to find out what the jungle holds for me. So I am that type of a person who has had enough interesting and exciting experiences in his life, which I'm not able to talk to you today about those things. I think I'll read a few poems first, and then we'll see what we can do after I read, say, a couple of poems. Okay? So, this poem is titled Earth. Earth, I think you have got the papers with you, those of you who have got the folios. It has a few of my poems, yes. Earth. Can't understand why. Sometimes I go blind for this earth, for this squalid, red earth. I can't understand why sometimes I go blind for this earth, for this squalid, red earth. At times, poets would say, don't take away anything from this earth, water or richness or lightness of the earth. I'm sorry. Don't take away anything from this earth, water or richness or lightness of the heart. And the country's leaders would say, dig out the iron ore, the manganese and the bauxite, and from the warm depths of its tears, its ancient God. This earth, which consumes us as we feed it, claiming the last remnant of the minister's conscience, and where never ends tomorrow's hunger. But still, this earth is mine, though I have never worked as a laborer or plowed the fields. But from the deep, alive, unknown of its gaze, at times I have seen a simple truth. And though my home is far away, a home I have never seen, with neither roof nor wall, window or door, I know it's there, where the earth feels itself and the gentle jasmines of my heart goes on, losing its petals one by one. The second poem, it's on the other side. It's called the 15th of August. The 15th of August. You know, it's our Independence Day. And every day has been mostly the same to all of us, I guess. Nothing has changed through the years. The 15th of August, a day when nothing comes and goes. I pick up a little earth, smell it. Does all earth smell like that? Earth's smell was not this 66 years back. I was 18. It was then that a dark rain fell, blowing tenderness out of our lives. Freedom, our smiling leaders shouted. Freedom, we too ranted. Nothing is the same anymore. Not the way the rainbow dried its eyes in the rainbow's house. Not our love, where we lived without knowing, nor memory that hung like a charm. Even the silence of the fields of rice sounds like a factory's dumb red hum. Unknown behind me, the day struggles with its empty hours. A raped girl dies. A raped girl dies. And the next poem, a fairly long one, is titled Uneven Mercies. I am afraid this is my land. I am afraid this is my land. Here, the half-starved mongrels which bark fretfully at the gate are not mine. Yet they are in a way ordering my life. The shadows across my body live out here. They grow old and become parents and ancestors. I'm afraid this is my land. Here history puts out its old wrinkled hands, but I don't know if I could hold them, whether history was friend or my enemy anymore. This childish scrap of rock Ashoka built is more than 2000 years old. But I can never understand its future. Its face frayed from the hushed laughter of years. It still says what it said then. I'm afraid this is my land. Why do you suppose I live in this empty place where the blood of the unjustly killed never cries out, flowing noiselessly on this earth? Like history, incurable migraine, but unavoidable to see its famous face looked so vulnerable and empty. I'm afraid this is my land. Perhaps I'm unkind to be talking like this, but here the closed door of ritual never opens, although out in the tired fields where paddies ripen, about the time the migrating monarch butterflies hover in the trees as they fly down south, and my beautiful grandmother holds her head between her knees as she weeps in the shadow of her death. There is only the world's hatred for her to hide it under her threadbare blanket. It is the dream that begs for night, where she gave up her daughters to rape, the dream that lost count of the times she coaxed it to speak, but the truth would not. I'm afraid this is my land. Here my heart is frightened of poems that dispense heroism to mothers whose infants are killed before they are born, of lips that smile when they dispense those long screams to the heart that feeds them its body. I'm frightened of religion that is so diseased it has lost its power to think and goes on crushing the poor and the anguished. I'm afraid this is my land. With little to believe in, we believe in the blue that pours out of the sky to celebrate the insistence with which man easily turns into a god as he burns alive a missionary and his two sons to teach them a lesson because they professed another faith. I'm afraid this is my land still. Somewhere in the words of this poem, I'm defeated by the blood that tightens my heart, by my thousand thoughts that fail to fall asleep over that silent place where terror and peace meet. Today I find myself lying about my life when I walk into a room full of people obsessed with religion and power and find only our shadows history has left behind. I walk aimlessly as the wind whips up over the river, and I feel the pleasures of men who write the story of India with the epics, with the feet of epics smeared with blood. Thank you. I'll take a little break. Take a pani tea.
Actually, I don't want to make any comment right away, but I do have questions.
Your first book, relationship, there also you have correlated yourself with the land.
Yes.
And now also you are also telling similar. What is there any difference between your perception or feelings during these several years?
Yes, Asu, yes, a very pertinent question. The point is, when I wrote relationship, that was in 80,
Yeah.
and that was 35 years back. And then it was more or less, my relation to the land was more or less romantic. You understand? So you'll find more romantic lines in relationship, which I don't feel hold good now. Now there is something else. Maybe there is irony in this poem, a hidden irony. And I say it is my land. You know, I would like to live nowhere else. You know, my friends have all settled in America. You see, Ramanujan, this, that, all of them, even Parthasarathi, Mandalaya Scooper, so many people are there now. And I also got chances, opportunities to settle down. But I like to come away, and take my uh, puchkas over here with the dirty water, dirty tamarind water. I love puchkas, gupchups and all that. So there are things like that that I can't give up. And even though I don't like, I live in beside a very dirty drain in Cuttack town. But then I live there. And I pass by that every day. I mean, 2 or 3 times or 4 times a day. But then that doesn't. I don't feel the dirty smell, the stink of the drain, because people live there. They take the rice there, just beside that dirty drain in Patapatapur in Cuttack. But that is how we live, and I can't say that is not my land. Cuttack is my land. India is my land. Odisha is my land. My mother is my mother, although I don't like her.
Sir, how Cuttack in particular has constructed your poetic persona?
I don't know. No, I lived there, no, it's just that because I was born there. Suppose I would have lived in Koraput. Koraput would have been mine. But more or less I take in Odisha. Odisha is mine. Yeah, when I started writing poetry, it was Odisha just of all. I did not write, I have not written romantic love poems. I don't know how to write love poems. And why should a person make love instead of writing a love poem?
So you mean you were making love instead of writing love poems?
Yes. Yes, you're right.
Well, I'm going to make remarks. I must say that, of course, I have not read your Oriya poems. I don't know Oriya. But about your English poems, the ones that you have read, for example, we can make some comments on these poems. I think in the way you presented your arrival as far as poetry writing is concerned, in that construction, the personal construction of your own genealogy, if I could say, you have mentioned troubled relationship in your childhood, in your adulthood, the restlessness that you felt, which remained largely undefined. But your poems are so well structured. It seems as if there was a preparation not only of this kind, that was almost forced in a way, or circumscribed by your situation. The poetry itself is very well structured. Thoughts are very well articulated. They almost touch a level of poetic perfection. These things are practiced by a lot of people who write poetry. So, for example, in the last session when you talked about spontaneity, you talked about heartfelt things about poetic content and all that. Actually, I did not take you very seriously then. I thought that you were just making a remark, out of just by way, because most of us, I wouldn't say about my own poetry that it's just heartfelt. I think that there is I will be dishonest if I say that there is not an intellectual preparation which has gone into writing the kind of poetry I write. I am I destroy my poems. I can write poems which can betray my own position, for example. And I do not know from where they have come. I almost find them so profane that they challenge my poetic sensibility, which is intellectually honed, for example. So these kinds of struggles one faces when one is becoming a poet. I agree with you that it's very hard to be a poet. It's not an easy choice. If somebody wants to say that he or she wants to be a poet, I am sure the kind of skepticism you bring can be brought into it, because you can't decide to be a poet. But certainly I think that there is a lot of preparation, a lot of reading, a lot of going through your own anxiety, intellectually shaping them. These are very complex processes which one goes through to the extent that one is extremely lonely in that exercise when you're writing, when you are becoming a poet. There are so many things that I thoroughly dislike about, for example, even my own situation, which to others would appear rather happy, would appear rather elitist. For example, I have written a poem about my mother. It's in Hindi. I will not be reading it today here. But it's about the emptiness in the lives of women who come from aristocratic families. It's about my mother's early death and how my nani, my grandmother, felt about her daughter. And from her daughter's demise, she derived many conclusions about her own life, in which she actually thinks that she is already dead, in the sense that she doesn't have a life. This life that her aristocratic background offers her, shapes her, comforts her, is no life. And her grieving is 1,000 times more when she realizes, about her life. She's least bothered about her grandchildren, like us. We were six brothers and sisters, and selfishly, she declared that her grief for her daughter is much more than our grief for our mother. You understand? So these are very, very blood-wrenching situations which you face when you become a poet. And when I wrote this poem, I did not know how I felt about my grandmother, which comes out in my poetry. Obviously, there was some part of me which noticed even as a child that my grandmother is being so selfish about her own grief, whereas we as children were wailing in a different kind of pain and unhappiness. And that pain could not have been expressed poetically if I had not intellectually prepared myself as a feminist. I'm telling you, that is a feminist poem that I wrote. If I had not had that kind of intellectual background, I would not have written this. This complex reality would have never been expressed in the way it has been. So what I mean to say is that I think that there is a depth which you are hiding from your audience today, and you owe us a little more in-depth discussion.
So, as I said, I never wanted to be a poet. I wanted to be a physicist. And I almost completed my research work in theoretical physics, but then I gave it up. I said, I'm a restless fellow. And your poetry comes out of, anybody's poetry comes out of reminiscence. Reminiscence, matlab memory. And your whole life is reminiscence, your whole life is one long memory. So poetry also is one long memory. And the wounds you have had in your childhood, in your youth, those wounds never go away. They always stay. The scars are there, even though the wounds have healed. It's those scars that bleed invisibly when you are alone and you can't sleep at night. When you stand near the front gate of your house and you're alone and there is nobody in the house and people are passing by, the girl coming back from office with a heavy handbag, her eyes with all the shadows of the world in them, or the crippled dog which comes to you near the gate and licks your hand when you don't ask the dog to do it. These things, Or when a bird goes by, when a bird flies by and leaves nothing but a short, brief memory of life that has gone by, of a parrot you will never see again. These things are the stuff of which poetry is made. It's not only what is happening around you, yet poetry is all about what is happening around you. It's not that you have to be socially committed or politically committed to write good, strong poetry. It's that a poet has to keep his eyes, mind, ears, heart totally open to the world around him and feel those wounds bleed in the sadness of the nights that you can't escape from. I don't know what to say, but Odisha has been the feeding ground of my poetry, and I was born here. Chandrabhaga also holds a special fascination for me. That's why I named my journal Chandrabhaga. I don't know. Again, these are very sentimental things, and there are no reasons that I can find for all these things. There is no reason I can find for liking Odisha. There is no reason. It's a corn of Odisha. What is there? What is there in this dilapidated, decrepit country where 40% of the people are going hungry even 66 years after independence? What is there in this country? Why do you stay here? You could have gone. Today I stay alone in a dilapidated little house. There's nobody there. My wife died 7 years back. My son and family left for Singapore. They are no more here. So why the hell am I staying here? What is there in Odisha that pulls me? There are no answers. But Odisha brings tears to my eyes. I'll read a few poems. This is a fairly recent poem, and it's titled Uneasy in the Silent Night. Uneasy in the silent night. Uneasy here in the silent night, blind all along, blind to the real meaning of death and its life, we come up with a play where the actors, with nowhere to turn, simply palpitate slowly like stars streaming out in the sky. It is the wounds of your life that look down at me, uncertain what to do, and your eyes shut, leaving to find another life on another world. I am the stranger who would hold back his tears, my spirit conditioned to the actor's body, hard, disciplined. And I look for the pain when I lean over your cold face, as I realize I was using it to escape whatever it was I was running away from. Perhaps from memory, helpless against love or sympathy, hovering above the ground like rain that never fell. Among the carnival frenzy in Como that day, I saw the fear in your eyes, hugging your chest, your lips ghosting a smile. You are what you are, floating against the sides of this day, O love. Let the silent night make us love the silence of your love. In 1971, when I wrote my first book, there was a poem on Ashoka, Ashoka was never my hero, and I've always hated Ashoka for conquering Kalinga. So Ashoka is never my hero. Ashoka, but this is a poem on Ashoka. Ashoka, slashed with blood-red light, Ashoka turns away from himself, proclaiming, "All men are my children." The silk throats of the waters of the Daya, choked with fear and pain, long to speak. The hawk of lightness in the sky now begins its long gyre. The day of days shows its raw power. He had not thought that heaven would be something to leave him afloat on a flood of unfathomable silence, as both life and death stopped his smile. Beyond, the river struggled on with the bamboos drowning their long hair and with the lotuses of grief floating in their sleep. How had he deserved this beauty, this path leading backward through conquests that turned their long night pale? Peace carries too much weight to be spoken out aloud. Its mask, always terrible to look at. And when the old moon rose once more to the devouring evening of victory, to laughter and to revelry, its meager light seemed to gild the wounded faces of those women picking leftovers of their fallen men in the tortured valley of the Daya. The sky had not blinded Ashoka still, and the stars were trembling with blood. Karuvaki, Kalinga's vanquished princess, was worth more than 100,000 dead. In his heart, the light of victory left. Meaning had not returned to history yet. Language takes a long time to come out of images, the edicts of hollow praises. The angels had already been called down. There was no earth he'd seen that was like the one he stood on now. The wounds had closed soon, full of the breath of the world to fill the infinite, his sun's vast light. Elsewhere, the dawn wept to mist. The grasses were sweet and green under the triumphant arches of Magad. There will always be two worlds, Ashoka thought, what he saw now and what he feared to see. He was disturbed by a sound, a murmur as of exhausted footfalls far away, or of broken sobs longing to plunge into swords and be silenced. Maybe I'll read some few poems. I've got my books there. I'm not a person who can speak, so if you allow me, I'll read some poems, and that will be, because my poems talk about my own experiences.
That will be better.
And I would like to say that I've been fairly honest in my poems. And whatever has been there in any poem has either happened to me or happened to a close friend of mine. That's the truth. It's not that I've written from imagination. I don't go around in a car and all that. My whole life I spent on a bicycle, bicycling down to Revanta College and to Shalavara Women's College. And I just bought a scooter as a target of my career. So I don't have a car or anything to show off. Anyway, and so one day had been to Gopalpuram Sea and with a friend of mine. And in Gopalpuram Sea, there are, these fishermen's huts over there. And these fishermen go fishing and try to bring back their catch and then sell their catch. And most of the time, many of the days, they don't have anything to show or to sell in the market. And so again, this is something which is very true. As I said, it could have happened to me or to a close friend of mine. So you can take whatever you want from this poem. It is called Hunger, Mokka. So it's hunger again. And it was written a very long time back. Say again in 71. Oh no, I think earlier still, 70, 60. But it still holds true. The situation hasn't changed. Poverty still stalks the streets of Odisha. Hunger. It was hard to believe. The flesh was heavy on my back. It was hard to believe the flesh was heavy on my back. The fisherman said, "Will you have her?" Carelessly trailing his nets and his nerves, as though his words sanctified the purpose with which he faced himself. I saw his white bone thrash his eyes. I followed him across the sprawling sands, my mind thumping in the flesh's sling. Hope lay perhaps in burning the house I lived in. Silence gripped my sleeves. His body clawed up at the froth his old nets had only dragged up from the seas. In the flickering dark, his shack opened like a wound. The wind was I, and the days and the nights before. Palm fronds scratched my skin. Inside the shack, an oil lamp splayed the hours bunched to those walls. Over and over, the sticky suit crossed the space of my mind. I heard him say, "My daughter, she's just turned 15. Feel her. I'll be back soon. Your bus leaves at 9. The sky fell on me, and a father's exhausted wide. Long and lean, her ears were cold as rubber. She opened her wormy legs wide. I felt the hunger there, the other one, the fish slithering, turning inside."
May I just make a comment here?
Please do.
Because this poem is prescribed, prescribed in Delhi University on graduate syllabus.
Yes.
And before coming to the department, you came to health psychology, you remember?
Yes.
So while we were teaching, the students' idea, because we never knew.
I don't think this should be prescribed to the students.
No, this was
Students'
this is prescribed.
okay.
You know for that.
Yes, yes.
Maharashtra wrote a small
Yes, yes, Master.
Yeah, so there
Yes.
are 3 poems of yours.
Yes. No, 5 poems are there.
Eh?
5 poems are there. In the DU honors course. Yes.
3, only 3.
Anyway, that's all.
That is yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So undergraduate fellows.
Yeah.
So the first one is hunger, and students they feel, meaning you are of course brutally true to yourself, but sometimes the young mind who has come just from their school, they feel that they are, the poet is too autobiographical, and by too autobiographical he is also a bad person, not as a bad poet.
Bad person.
Yeah, even in their writing, that annual exam, if suppose hunger, of course.
A student is at total liberty
Yeah,
to crucify me.
exactly. So this is what I wanted to.
Yes, yeah, I know.
Send a
And
message.
I think it shouldn't be prescribed for students.
Undergraduate students, why not?
No, because no, you said today, the situation has changed.
Yeah.
we can see what's happening to the students nowadays. I mean, what sort of lives they are leading.
So if a
Yes,
girl,
please.
a girl of that age in reality goes through that in our country a million times,
Yes.
a student of that age can read about it.
Yeah.
So I don't think
there is no
there should
problem.
be any
Yeah.
inhibition in prescribing that to another graduate class.
But if they say this person is bad, I don't mind.
That's okay, that's
I mean, what is that? I don't know, but is a person totally good? I don't think so. And what if they don't know? Good and evil are,
I don't understand.
it's a situation. It's a situation which makes a person good or evil at that particular moment.
The author poet is seducing a girl, meaning, so that of course they will not understand the criticality of the poet's persona who is trying to give a viewpoint, meaning the young mind I am talking about. It is not that you are wrong, but it is the students, that who have meaning written their answer.
But isn't this happening in our country?
It's happening in our country.
Why not?
It is happening. So, being a teacher, our duty is to actually, that meaning we say several things. Hunger is not just flesh of hunger, also hunger of mind, body, that wealth and several hunger.
Exactly.
So we actually try to, but that young mind, I'm talking about the perception of young mind.
Yes, that's right.
Not telling you that you are wrong.
But then I am not, the focus here is on the hunger of the body. I mean, not the physical, I mean the hunger of the belly.
Belly.
I'm talking about that at the end of the poem.
Yeah. So we try to actually provide them enough food for thought by saying that this is the reality happening around the the globe, and here is a poet persona who is that taking the fact into account while describing.
Yes.
Whether this happened in his real life, that we don't know.
But Rajkumar, I think after today, after you've heard it from the poet himself, describing the situation and crying in front of you as an ardent, incurable lover of a particular piece of land and culture. It is arising out of deep compassion and love for Orissa. At least today, I won't call him a nationalist because nationalism is also a very dicey word. But poets, filmmakers, if they do not have obsession, if they don't have that kind of brutal honesty with which they deal with cruelties that persist in our society and we let it persist, then there wouldn't be a poet like Jayant. So you can in fact teach this particular poem and don't make judgment about young minds. Young minds are to be molded. Young minds are to be honed, to be nurtured. And I think, above all, it is a feminist poet. He may not say that he's feminist. I don't mind. Right? But I think it's a very, very disturbing feminist poem. And it must be, if ever I am in any of these committees, this poem will be taught as a feminist poem from now onwards. I think this is the appeal of this poem. I mean, this is the level to which feminism has to come, even if the poet says it's not feminist. We have to walk 2 miles to get this poem, hold it and bring it. I think today it has been an extraordinary experience for me. I mean, I'm not chairing this meeting as some academic and all that, the distrust that you have towards them. I have become more of a poet, sitting here and listening to him and the way he's talking about things, and I think he has opened up today. I do not know. This is my first meeting with him. In the way he has opened up to you all, he may not have opened up in a similar manner. It is a poetic experience that we are going through. It is an extraordinary moment, but I'm saying it because it's being also recorded. It will give you a new way to approach Jayant Mahapatra, to teach him, to understand him. The man who lives beside a gutter, alone in a dilapidated house. There has got to be some terrific explanation for this. And the one explanation that I can think of now is that only a poet can do this. Only a poet can do this. It's been a tremendous treat. And for this festival also, I think it's an extraordinary moment for Chandrabhaga Poetry Festival. It's an achievement. So if I can ask you to read one of the poems.
No, I want to know whether there have been discussions in Odisha or in Indian English literature on this poem Ashoka and its the historical judgment or argument that it presents. Because in Odisha also, Ashoka is a hero for the Odisha consciousness.
Yes.
So the nationalist project that we have, uses Ashoka and Ashoka Dharma Chakra, not the Pranaka Chakra, but the Dharma Chakra, and the Ashoka pillars, and the Ashoka heritage as the symbol of Indian state. Nehru created for certain reasons, and we have all grown up understanding the inspirational value of the theme Ashoka. I don't want to say myth Ashoka, the theme Ashoka. But I haven't read this poem before. It's absolutely, I shouldn't say devastating. It really challenges the entire notion about what Ashoka should mean. The sky had not blinded Ashoka still. The stars trembling with blood. Karuvaki, Kalinga's vanquished princess, was worth more than 100,000 dead. I think this hasn't crossed any Indian's mind, let alone an Oriya mind. So can you tell me if the Oriya critics or the English literature critics or historians have taken note of this particular view on Ashoka? Or if our critics and Oriya intellectuals present here know this?
No. You see, this is an original Odia poem. I have translated it into English. When it appeared in Odia, nobody took notice. Nobody has taken notice. And that's a pity. I think nobody thinks I write poetry. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, but okay, you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
So in continuation of that, I just want to.
He wants to say something and then
There is
Ashutosh Babu, please. The chair should please.
Yeah. So just to answer one question that we have also another poem of Jant Mahapatra in Delhi University's syllabus called Dhauli.
Yes.
Yeah, where we talk about that how the land of Odisha changed Ashoka from Chandasoka to Dharmasoka. In other words, that how the meaning the idea of course, Buddhist, that ideal and ideology change a heavily power-hungry man to be a man of maybe passionate individual who again went non-violence and kind of thing. So these are some of the things that we always refer to while citing history of India. But we never go to such an extent by saying, of course, that Dhauli is a poem that is more devastating because the war and the river, that has a full of that blood. So that itself is a kind of that symbolism for Ashoka to prove himself that he was.
My friend, you go up the Dholi hill, you'll only see the river turn blood. You won't see the beauty of the scene. It just disappears from my memory and disappears from my friend's memory. And things about Odisha. Defeat after defeat after defeat has made us like this. First the Afghans, then the Mughals, then the Marathas, then the British. And what have we got left with? Nothing. only to show our defeat and Ashoka's peace edict on the Dhauli Hill. Is that why we are living?
Yeah. So this is what.
I think I was almost going to ask the same thing. That this historical consciousness for 2000 years, what from Daya Nadi and this Asoka, now it is Asoka. It is time and again is appearing in different forms in your poetry.
Yes.
So this consciousness, which is maybe, that means you are consciously aware of this historical process, or it is there infused in your blood,
I don't know.
so that it is able to create your these poetic expressions.
I couldn't tell you. I'd
That
like
means
to-
because you are very much conscious about this
Yeah, I am.
our historical process.
Yeah.
Where our contemporary poets of your time and all that, they are very conveniently avoided the history. They have tried to glorify rather in some other way
Yes.
the whole situation. Whereas you are coming out with the naked truth. But so far your poetry is concerned, how you assimilate history into your poetry. It is not just in a superficial sense, it is in a very deeper sense you are assimilating it. That is what I want to point out.
I don't know, I can't answer.
And maybe is it the reason, that is why, because of this consciousness or this type of feelings, they are inherent or very deep laid in you, you love this land so much.
I don't know.
Because I am trying to interpret certain things.
Yeah.
I
this
don't
is-
know that I could express myself properly.
No, I understood. This is related to this. I have found that most writers, particularly poets, but also others, they take the received history, namely what they have studied in schools or colleges, and what the state and the ruling agencies propagate about history as given. And then they use their great skills of representation, turning of words, as you said, by poets, and all the masterly skills to create stories of hate or love, defeat and conquest. And there are two kinds of transmissions of historical knowledge. First, that history is always created at a particular point of time by the rulers through institutions, and that is transmitted through textbooks to the next generation. So this understanding that history is actually a contemporary creation of the past. It is not immutable truth that is uncontested and that flows from generation to generation. It is always created by the present. So this is about the notion of history which uncritically writers who don't have the time to study history, to go to alternative sources, historical debates or theories of history, they don't have the time, so they receive that. And the second is because of the institutions of state, Sahitya Academy, institutions of culture, tourism, syllabus committees of the universities, colleges, school textbook committees, they choose certain kinds of writers. You know, your book will be accepted by the textbook board or the Ram Mohan Foundation if you have a book like that. If you have a critical book or some other kind of book, it will not be. So, the history that will sell and that will be acceptable to the contemporary rulers, that is the history you receive, and then you go on writing using all your skills, beautiful literary and creative skills, to put that history at the feet of the state. Now, I mean, here is one who has a Oriya sentiment and a hurt pride that took you to question the representation of this kind of symbol, the Asoka theme that has been built for the last 60 years in India, or even before. And then you find, you are amazed that look, people go to that piece, pagoda, and don't see the river of blood. They remember a transformation, the Dharmasaka. They don't see the beautiful pre-war scene that was existing at that time, or what would have been possible without that war, and so on. So, two sets of transmissions of historical knowledge informs literary creators. So, is it that your heart feeling really led you to writing this, or you also made some investigation to question the received history?
Maybe I was hurt, I am still hurt. You see, without my two arms, one is history and one is tradition. Without my two arms of history and tradition, I can't write poetry. Isn't that true? You cut my hands out, cut history out, cut tradition out, what will I write about? And that is what binds me to this land.
So in a way, this poet's destiny to be living with memories, for example, which he pointed out, is the lane where he is taking a stroll all the time. Things cannot be forgotten because they are present in memory. The state and its power to construct history according to its own hegemonic needs can be challenged because the poet is situated somewhere else. Poet is in the realm of memories. So it's not such a common expression when a poet says that memory is an asset for a poet, and that poetry actually dwells in lanes of memory. I think today I understood this alternative space where poets live. Today I've been able to understand, and that is why they are against the state. Often they are against anything that is conveniently constructed. They find themselves poetically opposed to things which are, I remember a poet's, a Hindi poet, I can't remember his name, when he says that why Lakshmi always goes to those who are corrupt. Why Lakshmi doesn't come to people who are honest? These are questions which are pricking questions. And they have poetic point here. A poet feels this way because poet is situated somewhere else, basically.
May I ask one simple question?
Yes, please.
Actually, I am forgetting the exact heading of your poem, but that is about women. On women, you wrote some poem. I read it long back. It was, the diction was so, it one becomes breathless, whatever you have written. I'm really forgetting the lines of the poem, but it enchanted me so much that actually Samarendra Nayak wrote a book and went to present you, Sabda Nari. And then you presented him that poem. And he brought it back to me and gave me that poem on women. Do you remember what is that poem?
No.
You don't remember? You write something on women's question, some poem, some widow, some post. I say, actually, I'm forgetting. Don't remember, no?
Always
There is a poem, always you please.
Always.
Always.
This is a short poem titled Always. Always. This little voice in which all kinds of things are happening. This little voice, in which all kinds of things are happening. Where will the road end? The body stop begging for rest? When will the empty land of the present cease to curl up in an abandoned temple? Always, I will carry the naked clouds of India even when I have nowhere to go. Daubed with blood, birth and death pass by. Two wild horses, their heads lowered, tenacious, searching away in the shadows they cast. Anini, Monday achi gote chhotiya, very small. But it's an old poem, and I wrote it years ago. I don't remember any other poem. The title of the poem is, I'll translate it, maybe somebody else will translate it from it. The title of the poem is Chua Chua Katha, or a poem on untouchability. A poem on untouchability. ବନ୍ଧୁଗଣ ଏତିକି ମୋର ଗୁହାରି ଯେ ମୁଁ ମଲା ଦିନ ତମେ ମୋ ମୃତ୍ୟୁ ଶଯ୍ୟା ପାଖେ ଛିଡ଼ା ହେଇ ଦୁଃଖରେ ଭାବୁଥିବ ଯେ ତମକୁ ଘରକୁ ଫେରି ଆଗେ ତମକୁ ଗାଧେଇବାକୁ ହବ. It's a very short poem. I couldn't read it properly. It's about, that on the day of my death, it's written to a friend of mine, dear friend, just don't stand there with a sorrowful face and think while standing by my dead body that you have to go back home and wash yourself before entering the house. This is it. I'll read one more poem and then finish up. This is again on the 15th of August, but it's a different poem and it's called Of Independence Day. Of Independence Day. We have lost those first days. We have lost those first days that had crowned themselves with thorns. We have lost those first days that had crowned themselves with thorns. The damp, tender grass growing to sanctuary on faiths we could not manage to understand. We have lost all those stories about the rustle of the blood that caught its breath when the British seized our laughter, tossing timelessly for ages beneath the time of the sun. Our dead too among the scrub on the river bank. We have lost the pain of making love, the mist and the darkness of the dance that fumbled in its air, and in the eyes of a woman, the dark prayers that fluttered like temple banners in the sun. We are careful to say nothing now to our children that might displease or provoke them. A Rubik cube of menace, we feel, spins carelessly in their immature hands. Have you noticed how the grass is empty? I asked my son. His fingertips seem to hold little tongues of fire he is unaware of. This talk about India's freedom struggle is nurtured because of our own weakness, the black and white eyes of our children say. And the ashes of our dead take the children by surprise, spurting up endlessly like water. Today we creep in surreptitiously into the house and pull our memories of the dead in after us. The computer's increasing sound cannot be drowned by mere noises of the dead. Perhaps this was a song of the earth going to ruin our children are getting into to amuse themselves and arrive, but with the child's pulse of our past How could we be strong and aggressive and free? The thought of buried treasure still seemed like a confirmation of a form or a voice to us. But where was it that one could hide? It's only the children, perhaps, who can find a place outside of both good and evil. Like Roshanara, eyes hidden behind dark glasses, bearing down with the sun's arrogance, or because India always wanders. The trouble is, the dead always extend their hands, but the children are alarmed by the nude, ghastly bones. The sun runs on without seeing or hearing, and we have hung out the carcass of the past in the crossroads. Our children keep seeing our fingers pulling shreds of meat from it. I think I could have read more, but I'm not feeling okay. If you have any questions, I'll be answering on anything. Personal life, career, whatever.
One thing to know about the poem, again going back to your title called Grandfather.
Yeah.
So could you just talk about a little background of writing?
You know, this poem called Grand. You know, I told you that most of my poems have come from real life experiences. And this grandfather, you know, which is there in the Delhi University syllabus. And that came about in 1866 when he was starving, and there was a terrible famine all over in Odisha. And he was there in a village, and they sold off everything. I mean, his parents, there was nothing left. So he wandered around, chewing on tamarind leaves and roots that he found from the soil, from the sands of the Mahanadi. And at last, when he couldn't survive, he walked all the way from his village to a missionary shelter here in Odisha, where he was picked up by the missionaries, and then he could subsist there. He was given food, shelter, and of course he changed his religion. I think I'd better read the poem and finish off with that. So that's also a true event, and you know, the specter of hunger is always there in my blood. And it was not only my grandfather who survived after being taken up by white missionaries in Cuttack, but it was also my grandmother, who was a little girl. My grandfather was about 16. My grandmother was about 11, and she was playing in a village, in another village, say about 20 kilometers away. And at that time, why, I don't know, my grandfather has written a diary which I have preserved, and that is the only living record of a person who has gone through the famine in Odisha in 1866. There is no other record anywhere. The only record I have is with me. And so my grandfather was a little girl of 13 or 11 or something, and she was playing in the courtyard when a bullock cart with about 12 girls with a chaprasi or a chowkidar was going that way through the village yard, to the village main yard. You know, there is always a main yard of the village, and he was passing through in his bullock cart when he counted the girls, and he found that there were 11 girls instead of 12, and he had to show why he had 11 instead of 12. So he found my grandmother, the little girl, playing in that yard. So he just ran, picked this little girl up, and put her forcibly in the cart, and took her away. And my grandfather writes about it so pathetically that I can't forget. I seem to hear the piteous cries of my grandmother's mother crying, Rupei, her name was Rupavati, but then in Odia they call her Rupei. Rupei, 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 but Rupei was nowhere. Rupei was there in the cart, subdued by the bullock cart driver and this person, and that was the last that my uh, uh, grandmother's mother saw my little grandmother. So these things have been there also in my mind. Again, as I said, memory has also played, I mean, it plays a very great part in my life. I can never reconcile myself. I don't know, maybe I'm neurotic or something, I don't know. But
You're just a poet.
I don't, but then these things happen and I have never been able to, as I said, sleep well. Sometimes these things happen and I just don't know what to do. So I try to write a poem, sometimes it comes through, sometimes it doesn't. It becomes a poem and it doesn't become a poem, and so we don't know what happens.
It's not a question, it's a question for me only. I'm saying it.
Okay, please.
It's a question for me. Sir, you told that you have got two hands.
Yeah.
Strengthening of poetry. One is tradition and another one is history.
Sorry?
You have got two hands.
Yeah.
Strengthening your poetry. One is tradition and another was
History. Yeah.
So I hope this Raju is a tradition and Asoka is a history.
You can't.
So what I perceive, it's a question to me and just I'm sharing it to you only.
No.
I mean, Asoka said history.
No, my friend. We don't live in either black or white. We live, the shadow lines are always there. We live in between somewhere. Sometimes we are here, sometimes we are there. In physics, this is what physics has taught me. Physics, nothing is a particle becomes a wave under certain conditions. So you can't call a particle a neutron is not a particle. It under certain conditions it behaves like a wave. So what will you call it? Will you call it a particle or will you call it a wave? So what is black? Is black really black or white really white? No. You are somewhere in between, or you are both of them. So what is good and what is evil? You don't know. We have made it. We have got these lines and made morality and we have woven morality into the character we are supposed to judge as correct. And so I don't know.
Well, actually, we found the poem.
Another point.
We found the poem.
I found the poem, grandfather, so please bear with the delay.
Page numbers are not given.
Grandfather. My grandfather kept a diary. I have the diary still with me. And the pages are all yellow and then difficult to decipher it, to read it through. But then it's a historic document for me. Grandfather. The yellowed diary's notes whisper in vernacular. The sound of forgotten pasture. The cramped cry that forces me to hear that voice. Now I stumble in your black-paged wake. No easy stir of cloud darkened the white skies of your day. The silence of dust grazed in the long afternoon sun, ruling the cracked and fallow earth, ate into the laughter of your flesh. For you it was the hardest question of all. Dead, empty trees stood by the dragging river, past your weakened body, flailing against your sleep. You thought of the way the jackals moved in order to move. Did you hear the young tamarind leaves rustle in the cold, mean nights of your belly? Did you see your own death? Watch it tear at your cries, break them into fits of hard, unnatural laughter? How old were you? Hunted, you turned coward and ran, the real animal in you plunging through your bone. You left your family behind, the buried things, the precious clod that praised the quality of a god. The imperishable that swung your broken body, turned it inside out. What did faith matter? What in the world so ancient and true for you to hold? Uneasily you dreamed toward the center of your web. The separate life let you survive, while perhaps the one you left wept in the blur of your heart. Now in a night of sleep and taunting rain, my son and I speak of that famine, nameless as stone. A conscience of years is between us. He is young. The worlds of glory are breaking down for him before me. Does he think of the past as a loss we have lived our own? Out of silence, we look back now at what we do not know. There is a dawn waiting beside us, whose signs are 100 odd years away from you, grandfather. You are an invisible piece on a board, whose move has made our children grow to know us, carrying us deep where our voices lapse into silence. We wish we knew you more. We wish we knew what it was to be against dying, to know the dignity that had to be earned dangerously, your last chance that was blindly terrifying, so unfair. We wish we had not to wake up with our smiles in the middle of some social order.
Just a very formal thing that I have to do, but I cannot do it with this kind of experience that we have had today. I think that in this session, we've come to know a poet. We've come to know his poetry, sources of his poetry, in the simplest terms that he has told us, that his poetry comes from real experiences and all that. But as I mentioned earlier, that these real experiences, when they become poetry, how they become poetry, how they acquire this form, this is the magic and this is the mystery. And I think mystery is nowhere else. It is in the poet itself, which the poet also doesn't like to reveal much about. I think to some extent, we have come to know him a little more than perhaps we've known him as just readers of his poetry. But a lot remains hidden. There's a lot more to this poet. And the fact that he is purely a poet. I mean, he has no lust for anything else. His worldly life, I should be using these words like sage and this and that, but very, very close, ascetic life that only satisfies after poetry comes. I think for me also, listening to him, the difficulty with which he spoke about himself, and later on he lightened up and said that, all right, ask questions, personal questions also, I'll answer. This is his trust that he has put in us, because we have appeared to him as understanding audiences and fellow poets. I think he's comfortable with us, and it is an achievement of this session. I'm very happy to have chaired this session and to have heard him so closely. I'm sorry that I coaxed him to open up a little bit, to reveal his depth, but trust me, a poet can never reveal the depth that he or she has. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to me with such care.
Thank you. And we reassemble after 10 minutes.